Yeah, you said we need guys who are wholly committed to sphere sovereignty. The language I've been using to for our listeners and with my local church as I'm discipling people, is saying we need 3 spheres, 2 kingdoms, 1 king, because there's so much teaching on radical kingdom theology versus Kuyperianism and then understanding Jesus and pressing his crown rights and his kingly authority on earth and in heaven. What does that mean? And how does that work with eschatology? Between pre-mill and all-mill and post-mill. I always tease the all-mill guys and say pre-mill is not yet but soon. And post-mill is not yet but I'm sorry.
The already but not yet.
And with post-mill, I would say, so pre-mill is not yet but soon. Post-mill is already but not fully. And then all-mill is already but not really.
That's right.
And obviously there's a sliding scale, and because some all-mill guys would really do believe in some serious, tangible aspects of Christ's rule and reign, but some of them though are just Christ is just reigning spiritually, ethereally.
It's all a spiritual drama in the heavenlies, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So my point is there's so much doctrine between eschatology comes into play, your understanding of kingdoms come into play, sphere sovereignty, Christ, his lordship rights, but what's been helpful in trying to be as clear and concise as possible is telling people 3 spheres, 2 kingdoms, 1 king. 3 spheres. This is speaking. There are a million different spheres. I have an HOA. That's a sphere. That's a real institution that has some real authority, but it's not a divinely instituted institution. It's so that doesn't mean there aren't any other groups. You can have a swim team. You can have a whatever. And there's medical institutions and the arts and markets and economy and all these different things. But in terms of divine spheres, we have the home, the church, and the state. And this is not a hierarchy of it's the state over, the church that's over families in the home. These are 3 parallel spheres that are autonomous with their own authority. And there are moments where there's overlap, like a Venn diagram. One is not over the other. So 3 spheres. There are 2 kingdoms. And what I'm trying to help people see is it's not the kingdom of common and sacred. I think that's a bad dualism. That's a bad distinction, and it's also not this 2 kingdoms of church and state, but it's the 2 kingdoms of light and darkness, and there can be light. So the kingdom of light, the church doesn't have a monopoly on that. Whenever you have a godly, righteous, Christian civil magistrate, you have light in the sphere of the state. And the Bible says false teachers will arise from among you, speaking about the sphere of the church. Whenever you have a false church with false prophets and false teachers, you have dark in the sphere of the church. And so you have 3 spheres, the kingdom of light and dark, that are distinct from one another, but overlapping. And then 1 king who's over all of it, who's Christ Jesus. And I think if you can get guys to understand that basic concept, and then understanding, having confidence in the authority that they have as husbands, as fathers, if they're elders, if they're deacons, if they're on the city council, and having guys actually get involved in local politics, and understanding how much authority they have, but also knowing exactly precisely where it stops, that all human authority is vested authority. There's no such thing as inherent human authority. No man has authority in and of himself. It's all stewardship. It's all given, vested by God to a particular end. And the moment you get past those ends, and so the last thing I was going to say is just that the state was a tyrant, but I think the church has been a tyrant too. And it seems like out of those 3 spheres, the one that has suffered the most, right? As pastors, we think about the church and the state is encroached over the church, and especially the last 2.5 years, with lockdowns, shut down your church. That's true. There's something there. But out of the 3 spheres of the home, the church, and the state, no sphere has had its authority gobbled up, like you said earlier, more than the home. The state has gobbled up a ton of familial fathers' responsibilities, but so I think the church has too. And again, that common denominator, like trying to find a correlation with pastors who are willing to shut down their churches or started not just saying, hey, masks are optional or even recommending, but actually requiring masks. Like when they did open, you have to wear a mask to attend. Those guys, I would say that's tyranny. That's a binding of the conscience. Even the reason why I wanted our church to open was because it's like, if our church is open, guess what? That allows for both consciences. Nobody has to come, but people can come. But if we close the church, what we're saying is anybody whose conscience is saying we should gather, we're saying, sorry, your conscience is now bound. You cannot submit to your own conscience. If the church is open and somebody's 85 years old with comorbidities and autoimmune disorder and stuff like, we're not mandating that they attend church, but the church being open, just from a logical standpoint, apart from the theology, just logically. The church open position is the more accommodating position. The mask, saying we're not requiring masks, we're also not banning masks. If somebody came with a mask, I wasn't going to take it off of their face, or pull it back and slap in the face and say, you're a libtard, I wasn't going to mock them for it. Maybe 2 years in, maybe a little bit of loving mocking, like, what are you doing? But, you're allowing for both. But what pastors didn't consider is it's like anytime you use the word require, or mandatory, or any, and especially with the church, the house of God, what you're essentially saying is that the one thing that Christ says is necessary for somebody to come to his table, faith, right? You're saying, well, in this case, it's faith plus a mask, faith plus like that. And I think pastors, one of the reasons they were content to pull that trigger and make those kinds of decisions so quickly and so haphazardly is because they didn't realize how big of a decision it actually was. They didn't realize that what they were saying was, you cannot come to the Lord's table unless you have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and a mask on, or we're just going to take the Lord's table away from his people for 4 months, or we're just like, they didn't realize. It's almost like a puppy, like some of these pastors, it goes all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. They were managerial leaders. They were like a puppy, but a Great Dane, right? Like a 9-month-old puppy that still thinks it weighs like 7 pounds, but it's actually like 65 pounds, and just making these decisions, not realizing how much power and how like the far-reaching implications and theological implications were of what they were deciding. And so guys were they were tyrants and without even realizing it. The last thing I was going to say, I forgot about this, but one way I think the church has encroached on the family in a form of tyranny is by having too many midweek programs. Like we're telling dads, like, dude, you need to be doing family worship. You're the pastor of your home. And then there's Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. And then the state with public schools, with this sports and that's, and all. And then it's just like families, like, you talk about doing the Westminster Shorter Catechism. And I think there's a lot of men who really do want to do something like that. And they're like, when? The church took all of our time, whatever the state left over. And so I just feel like the state is the major tyrant, but then whatever they don't gobble up, the church often gobbles up.
It does.
And then the family.
Because the people ask too, though. And that's where this is a corrective time where, like, what do people judge a church by a lot of times? Well, basically your music and your children's program.
That's right.
And so part of we have to we have 8 foundational commitments. One of our foundational commitments is we are committed to a streamlined form of ministry. And so any decision we make in our eldership, we run them by our 8 foundational commitments. They're our philosophy of ministry. And I was feeling the pressure to disciple people and almost added a midweek service. And we're like, you know what? The thing is, when you add these services, they don't go away a lot of times.
That's right.
Right. So church programs are kind of like government programs. Once you start one, they never go away. And even though there's like 5 people going to it, and it's like should have been killed forever ago, but it means a lot to this elder's wife, and therefore it keeps on going, right? But no, I think you're right. Is that that's the difficulty? Like, what happens when everything's broken down, when everything's chaotic? Where do you rebuild? And we're rebuilding. We're starting new churches. We're making new disciples, correcting imbalances. We're creating new formal networks, denominations. It's an exciting time because we get to rebuild. And this world, this idea of neutral world versus negative world, positive world, that comes from Aaron Renz, really starting to take off. And we don't live in neutral world anymore. Like, it is not seen as a good thing to be a Christian. It's not we are increasingly enemies of the state. Certainly enemies of the zeitgeist. And so now we're building churches for the so-called negative world, for when it's a negative to be a Christian. And that's what we have to do. So it's exciting to be part of it, man.
Yep, I completely agree. We're trying to focus on just the Lord's Day. We had, Sunday morning, and we just recently added, Sunday evening. If we, in the future, as the Lord provides, like we next thing would probably be Sunday school, like an optional 9 a.m. before church at 10 a.m. Eventually, maybe like a Sunday prayer meeting. We have our evening service at 5. Maybe there's a 4 o'clock prayer meeting. Like I want to have not just a Lord's hour, but a Lord's day. But that's all I want to have is a Lord's day. Because I just, when I look at church history, God has sustained his people in virtually, every nation, every culture, every century by having a robust Lord's day. And then the rest of the time, it's like, well, what are we doing? How is the church ministering? You're being the church. Like I want fathers to be in their home with their wives, with their children, but also I'm telling the guys all the time, like preaching this all of Christ for all of life, Kuyperianism, not one single square inch, of all God's creation that Christ doesn't cry out mine. Then they need time to start that business. That business isn't going to start itself, which means what that looks like is not having a Wednesday night service. Because Wednesday night, after working 40, 50 hours already that week, you need to be able to come home and be working on plans for starting your own business so that you're economically bulletproof and cancel proof, And so like we want these parallel Christian economies and businesses and all this kind of stuff. And that stuff takes time. And one of the reasons Christians don't have time is because the church takes all their time. So I love what you're saying, that streamline of ministry. And but the thing is, we're only 18 months in, and I'm already, like, as a pastor, having to remind our people of that when they're like, well, what if we had like a women's kind of, and I'm like, but remember what we're trying to do? Restore Christendom in every sphere of life. This, it's not just the ecclesiastical sphere. Like we want the Lord's Day to be like the Puritans' view, the market day for the soul. You come and you just get loaded up with all these goodies. It's the delectable mountains. Pilgrim's Progress. You get a glimpse of the celestial city, but then you go home and we say goodbye for the next 6 days.
We do. We do one men's meeting, one women's meeting, one youth gathering, and we do. We do women
weekly or monthly.
Monthly.
Yep,
one woman. So we do one women's on Tuesday, youth on Wednesday, and men on Thursday on staggered weeks. There's 1 week where nothing happens, and that way we don't steal Tuesday from someone always, or Wednesday always.
Love it.
And we do it. We try to do high quality. They all start and end at the same time. They, with the exception of the women's ministry, they're all elder led. And we find like you can get a lot accomplished, and people say, well, where are people going to fellowship? Well, they're adults, right? Like they can share phone numbers, and we don't have small groups right now. We don't need them. I'm not 100% against them. I'm not a fan on the whole, but Well, anyway.
Yep, I'm with you, man. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. We don't have small groups either, and it's exactly. I'd be hypocritical if I said like, and therefore we command no small groups, right? That's tyranny, just the other direction. So we're not making a rule about it, but I'm the same as you. It's like, man, I just think less is more right now because there's so much to do. There's just so much to do. All right. Stop twisting my arm. I know you want to hear the inside scoop. Here it is, the glorious vision of Right Response Ministries for the first half of next year, 2023. We have not one, not two, but 3 massive endeavors that we will accomplish by the grace of God. The first you already know about. It's our Theonomy and Postmillennialism conference. This is selling out incredibly fast. By the time this commercial airs, you may not even be able to get a ticket. I really don't know. So don't waste another moment. Go to rightresponseconference.com, rightresponseconference.com to join us for the Theonomy and Postmillennialism conference next year. Now, this is where you come in. We need your help. Our next 2 endeavors are, number 1, a documentary style film, and number 2, a brand new studio. Both of these things are seeking to accomplish one primary goal, which is excellent, high quality, glorious Christian media. We are tired of as Christians doing things poorly. We've done our best with what we have, but by God's grace, we want to do even better. This is not going to be just another video. This is not going to be a sermon or an interview or a podcast, but we're going to make a documentary style film. And we're going to be hiring Nathan Anderson, the director of On Earth as It Is in Heaven, a very, very successful postmillennialism documentary that's on Amazon and YouTube, came out a couple years ago. He's going to be flying in from Chile to help us direct this film. And our documentary is going to be on postmillennialism and theonomy, why it's biblically valid, why it's absolutely necessary, and why, by the grace of God, theonomy and postmillennialism are currently on the rise. So we're going to make this film, and we need your support. And not just this film, but we're going to make all of our videos and podcasting and everything we do here at Right Response Ministries better. We want to achieve the highest level of quality and Christian excellence that we possibly can. That's where the new studio comes in. This new film, our date that we're shooting for is that it would be complete and publicly available in May or June of 2023, next year. The studio, our goal is that it would be completely done in its construction and the equipment and the setup and the stage and everything by January, February of 2023 next year. We need your prayers. We need your encouragement. And for those of you who are willing to do so, we need your generous support. You can give towards these endeavors by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. Again, that's rightresponseministries.com/donate. Thank you so much for all your help. God bless.